Indiana Disability History Project, Center on Aging and Community, Indiana Institute on Disability and Community, Indiana University.
Live and work and what your job title is.
Okay, my name is Sandy Braunbeck, and I live in New Albany, Indiana, and I work at RAUC as the Director of ADA and Access Programs, which are the two non-vocational programs that we have here at RAUC. And I've been in that position for about 33 years now. Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Why don't you just go ahead and explain what those programs do?
Sure can, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if we are going to go into that, can you say what ADA stands for? So
Yes.
Any elimination of acronyms that you can do
I
is
understand.
helpful too.
Okay, okay. RAUC has always had a program for the more significantly disabled people. We've always had our sheltered workshop, and then we had a day program for people who were not interested or not meeting the skill level to work in the workshop. So we've had that day program. It's called ADA, which stands for Adult Developmental Activities, which really doesn't mean anything, and we thought many times about changing it until the Americans with Disabilities Act came into place, and all of a sudden ADA sort of rolled off your tongue. So we just kept that name. So that's one of the day services that I supervise. The other is a program called Access. It is an acronym for something. I don't know what it is. It's been so long, but it actually sort of is what its title is. It is an opportunity for our clients to access things of interest in their community. It can be on an individual basis, working with one staff person. It can be going out in a group. It can include volunteer work. There's no paid work in those activities. So those are the two non-vocational programs that we have. We had a third separate program up until about a year and a half ago, and that was our art studio that we had in downtown New Albany. And we had it operating there for about 15 years. And if you were familiar with the program that I'm not going to be able to remember, Pat Beeman and was it George Ducharme from up on the East Coast had given a presentation one year at the Summer Institute in Bellarmine. And they came from a small town on the East Coast, and they were incorporating a lot of people that were coming out of institutions into their small community. And they were trying to figure out some way to get those individuals really included in community life. And there was a small card store on the downtown Main Street, and at the back of the card store was a little post office. And when the gentleman who was running the post office was getting ready to retire, he said to Pat, he says, "Why don't you take the test and become the postmaster?" So she did, and she became the postmaster, and they turned that card shop into a place where people with disabilities sold the things that they had made. They worked there. They hosted different events for the community there. And that always stuck in my mind as such a wonderful, wonderful way to kind of in a meaningful way get people connected to the community. And we had a real strong creative arts program at RAUC we had for a number of years. And so I made a proposal to our board that we find a place like that in downtown New Albany, which we did on the main street. And it was a little storefront. And we were there for about 15 years doing a variety of art activities that sort of became our trademark of our art. We had to quit, we had to shut that place down because we didn't have money to pay the rent. Money has gotten very tight, and so that program now is back at Fairmont, where we were yesterday, and the ADA program is there, and the Access program, back under one roof as we were when it all began. So.
Okay, good. Well, that's like a great overview of all the things you're doing. I want to back up a little bit. How and when did you first get into this line of work?
Well, my father worked at RAUC. My father was, God rest his soul, he just passed away a couple of months ago. He was a disabled veteran from World War II. And he had both his hands blown off by a landmine, and his left leg was severely damaged. My dad had been a basketball and baseball coach, probably the best teacher I ever worked with. He was a real communicator, was able to explain things to someone so that you understood. Didn't matter what your degree was or how limited was your intelligence, he was able to explain things so that you would understand it. So he agreed to go and help them. And so when I was still in high school, I think he was paid a pittance, but he was paid something to work at Rauch. And in the morning, we'd get in our old green station wagon, and there would be me and 2 clients that lived nearby, and then my dad would go and pick up 2 elderly ladies who were the volunteer workers. And he would take me to Providence High School, drop me off, and then they would go to Rauch and open up the workshop and have their activities. And when Rauch, I think, had the first sheltered workshop in the state of Indiana, and he was very instrumental in getting that started. So it's always been something that we did. My brothers, as they grew up, always worked in the summer program. Rauch used to have very nice summer programs for people where they would take people camping and do all sorts of activities. And it was just sort of assumed that if you weren't going to school or you weren't working, you went to Rauch with Dad. And so I've been very much involved with Rauch since I was, in high school. Lived away from here for many, many years, and whenever I would run out of money for whatever reason, I'd come back here and I'd go to work at Rauch and get enough money to take me back to wherever it was I was living at that time. And then when my husband and I got married and I was pregnant with with our first son, Adam, we moved back here. We'd been living in Kansas City. And I was a stay-at-home mom with Adam for about 9 months, and then I needed to do something else. And Margie Hoover, who worked as the director at that time, called me and asked me if I would come and just substitute in the adult program for a while. And that was 33 years ago, and I never left after that. So.
And since people won't know what year necessarily this video was done in, what year was that? And also, I don't know if you could mention the name of your father. I don't want to have to go backwards, but it would be helpful to
Okay.
have his name. So years and names.
Okay. I started working at Rauch in 1979. My son was born in June, and I started the following March. So that's my anniversary date at Rauch. And my father, who worked here for many years before I did, his name was George Tinius, but everyone knew him as Tudor. That was his nickname, had been since he was a baseball player in high school. The story goes it was because he always ate Tootsie Rolls, but we never knew if that was true or not. But he was had a real great presence in our community. He was very well known. Because of the jobs he had had and just his own persona. And so he was a great representative of Rauch, and people associated Rauch with him always. And I can remember he would come home from church on Sunday, and he always wore shirts that had 2 pockets in them because it was hard for him to get things out of his pants. And he'd lean over the table and he'd flip up the flip on his shirt and knock all the money out from this pocket and then knock all the money out from that pocket. And basically people would just come up to him at church and say, here, buy something for the kids at Rauch. Just put it in his pocket, Or the place that he always went to get the groceries, they would say, well, here, take that basket of apples and go out and, and for the kids at Rauch. There was always a strong feeling in our community that the community kept Rauch going, okay? And it really did. And I think that has made for a very strong connection through the years between Rauch and the community. Mm-hmm.
Great. You're a pro. All right. So let's go back to the ADA program. Tell us how that program got started, and then also a little bit about, from your perspective, Muriel and Tim LeDuc's part in that process.
Well, as I said, I think the ADA program started here at Rauch because there really wasn't any sort of services for people with significant disabilities. The people that could not work in the workshop or could not get a job in the community. They really didn't have any place to go. They didn't have anything to do. And so my dad really started this ADA program. We did a lot of ceramics in the old days. We did weaving. We still have looms where we wove rugs for many, many, many years. And we were able to do those kinds of chores with people and hopefully to continue to develop their skills. You know, it concerns me that we think there is a time when we need to quit teaching people, particularly our individuals with developmental delays. You know, they need to continue to learn. And so I think that's something that we've always held. They always had goals. They always had things that they were working on, you know, to improve their life in some way. And that there was something meaningful and important that a person, regardless of their level of disability, my dad could teach anybody to weave a rug, okay? I mean, that's just something that he was able to do. And we sold the rugs for many years. We had a little gift shop. We had Harvest Homecoming where we would sell lots of rugs and ceramics. We quit doing the ceramics maybe in the late 80s. Both the ceramics and the country look, where the woven rugs had come into play, it became very popular. A lot of people had their own individual looms. We also, for years, had all the material donated to us. There was a company in Louisville, a bedding company, that my dad had made a contact with, and they never charged us anything for the material. We would send a big truck over, and they would bring tons and tons of material back. And I don't know if that gentleman retired or what, but we no longer got that material for free. And so the expense of continuing the weaving just got a little bit too much. But I think the nucleus of it was that regardless of a person's limitations, there is a place they can go during the day, and there's a place that they can do something that could be fun and meaningful, and also give their family perhaps a break from maybe having to take care of them during that period of time. Mm-hmm.
What were things like for those folks before they had a program like that to go to? How did that change their lives?
Well, they stayed at home, okay? The individuals stayed at home. My dad had more stories. I have a few stories like that, but he had more. You know, the origin of Rauch is that there was a family here in town. The mother's name was Leona Receiver. She only died maybe 3 years ago at like 105 years old when she passed away. And she had a daughter who I believe had Down syndrome. And there was a school for autistic children in Louisville, and she wanted some sort of schooling for her daughter. And she tried to get her in that school in Louisville, and they wouldn't accept her. But they told Mrs. Receiver, they said, you need to go back to Indiana and start your own school. This was before public law required that children with disabilities get an education. So I think Mrs. Receiver first talked to the public health nurses, who literally were the ones that went around in the city and in the community to individuals that needed some sort of medical help. And they were aware of the people in the community, the children and young adults that had disabilities. And so she asked them to tell these families if they were interested to get together for a meeting. She set a meeting date. And the Receivers used to have businesses down on Vincennes Street in New Albany, and it was kind of like a duplex. And on one side was a plumbing company. On the other side was a liquor store. And she said they decided this meeting probably needed to take place in the liquor store because they were really going to need all the help they could get to get all this accomplished. And at that time, that's when Crusade for Children was just starting. And so she put in a letter to Crusade for Children asking for $1,000 for a bus. She wanted a bus to go around and pick up the students and bring them into. She had managed Advent Christian Church, which is about 2 or 3 miles from here, had a basement, and they were going to allow her to have classes in this basement for the students. And so she went to the Crusade for Children, and evidently Rabbi Rauch, who was a very, from Louisville, a very prominent rabbi, was on the board that decided who was going to get the money. And she asked for $1,000 for a school bus to go around and pick up the retarded children to bring them into the church for classes. And he said to her, "Why do you think if we give you this money for a bus that people are going to let you take their handicapped children?" And she said to him sometime, "Rabbi Rauch, you just have to have faith." Okay? Well, with that, he gave her the $1,000, and she named the school after him. It was named Joseph Rauch Memorial School. It was called that for many years. One of my first years here at Rauch, I had to go and talk to some sewing group or something. And it was a bunch of little old ladies, and they were in the basement of this church. And I started telling my story about how, Rauch began with services in the basement of a church, and this little lady in the back of the room went, "This is the basement. This is the church." And it was Advent Christian Church. A gentleman who was the president of our board of directors for many years, he went to that church, and it was his job to clean everything up and make it nice for school the next day when the kids from Rauch would come. So that was his connection from when he was a teenager with services for Rauch, and years later became president of our board. So I guess that happens in a small town. Mm-hmm.
Sure, you have a lot of good small town stories. And just a little bit about, if you could tell us a little bit about how Muriel and Tim Leduc played a part in starting the ADA program.
Well, as I told the story, Tim Leduc and his mother Muriel played a very important role in our services, in ADA services. Tim definitely had more disabilities than any other individual we had ever served. I don't even know that we had anybody in a wheelchair before Tim came. We certainly didn't have anybody that needed the physical assistance that he needed to be fed, to physical assistance in the bathroom. We didn't have, very few of our people had good communication skills, so the fact that he was not able to communicate really wasn't that unusual. But his physical needs were something that we really were not that accustomed to. Muriel was an advocate for Tim from day one, as you can tell from their conversations when we spoke with them yesterday. And we were the only game in town. There weren't any other choices, okay? So if we weren't what she thought Tim needed, then she helped get the program to meet his needs. And I think we developed a pretty close relationship because of that. We had to do a lot of things differently for him than we did for any of our other clients. But I think he taught us a lot. He was certainly probably one of the most challenging people to support that we had. So other people that came along with other issues typically did not compare to what we had to learn to do, with him. So they had a real dramatic effect on our program. Muriel also felt that he needed to be doing something 12 months out of a year. Prior to that, Rauch ran like his public school calendar. We went in September and we ended in May or June. And I always call it Tim's year-round program because a few years after he started, we went, to the full 12 months out of a year, which was appreciated by all. It was really no big thing. I think it is important to know that Rauch was the only program that accepted people with those kinds of needs. And a number of years later, when other day programs started to open, which they did, there was sort of this, "Oh, aren't you afraid, that all of your clients are going to leave and go to another program?" And I always felt great relief with competition because we no longer had to be the only game in town. We were no longer had to be the ones to say, "Well, if we can't serve him, he has to stay home. Try this program, try that program." That all that responsibility was not on us. And we really have never lost a bunch of people to other programs. but it is comforting to know that there are other choices for parents. It's not good not to have choices, so.
You talked about learning being important. What kinds of things have you seen your clients learn, changes and progress that they've made?
I think when I think back over some of the astonishing things that I have seen our clients learn, well, first of all, I think I'm a teacher by education and by trade, elementary, kindergarten teacher for many years, and I love to teach. I think I love to teach. I especially loved working with this group of people because folks would say, well, you know, you'll never be able to teach him such and such, and I go, oh boy, you know, I can't wait to try to figure out how to do that. I was never particularly encouraged with a teacher's manual that told you what to say and how to say it. I would much rather be faced with how are we going to get Susie not to bang her nose until it bleeds? Well, why does she do that? You know, we had an individual, a young lady, that came in every day with her hands tied behind her back in restraints because she had such bad self-abusive behavior that once those restraints were untied, she started banging her nose until you had to call 911 to come and get it to stop. This was in the 80s. There were no behavior consultants. Now, you know, there's a pick list of behavior consultants and all sorts of approaches. There wasn't. I finally found a woman in Louisville, Julie Berman, who was a behavior consultant, and she did come over and teach us and our staff some very basic things about behavior. Also learned a lot about the importance, particularly of our clients who maybe can't talk and can't explain what their needs are, the importance of sensory motor things with people with significant disabilities, that what this young lady was doing was actually maybe trying to give herself some sort of signal or some sort of input to her own body and her own self, and the only way she knew how to do that was by banging her nose. And that was taught to me by a occupational therapist who worked in our children's services. And so she came up with a whole plan of what kinds of things we could do with that young woman to get her to feel comfortable with her hands not strapped behind her back, to do something meaningful with her hands other than bang her nose. And today, that young woman, no, she doesn't wear restraints. She carries a purse. She goes shopping. She goes out to restaurants. She feeds herself. She's getting ready to go into supported living. That is probably took maybe 10 years for that to be accomplished. I've had staff, because we did do some videotapes along the ways, and they'll say, well, that took a long time. I said, well, she didn't really have anything else to do. You know, she was there. This was the most important thing that we needed to do with her. This is what she needed to learn. Years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Richard Fox. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. He was one of the first people in University of Oregon that really did a lot with people with significant disabilities in work situations. And he had given a training here in Louisville many years ago. And he talked a lot about the importance of having relevant goals. And he talked about a client that he had who, this is probably not going to, you're probably going to want to edit this out, but he said that the client had goals to identify different colors. And he said, whereas the difficulty with this gentleman was that he couldn't control his bowels, okay? Couldn't control. And Richard Fox said he didn't know if the outcome was that they wanted him to be able to say, I just pooped brown on the green sofa, or what. But in other words, don't look at the colors. What do you need to do to help him not to be more continent and to not to do that? So things that you might think, well, we need to teach her colors or academic. No, she needed to know not how to bloody her nose anymore. So in looking at individuals that we serve based on what is probably going to keep them apart from other people and what's going to be easier for them to be included in the community and accepted in the community, those are the kind of things that I think probably we focus on and learn. We have one lady who, when you put her in a wheelchair, her legs would go right up in the wheelchair, and she would not be sitting properly for a young woman to go downtown. And I had quite a discussion with one of my staff. I said, well, until we can teach her how she needs to sit in this wheelchair, no. She's not going to go shopping, no, because we're not going to have her being pushed around downtown with not sitting, in a modest way. And so we worked on that, I think, looking at what it is that would make their life better and what it is that they need to do to have them to be more readily accepted, again, by the community. There are other advantages. We have a lot of people who have improved in things like their academics. Tim definitely had improved in his academics and his reading just by teaching him some sight words. A lot of people wanted to start by teaching the alphabet and phonetics and all that. And at that point in his life, teaching him by sight words was really the quickest way to get some good information, and he still learns, I think, via sight words more often than not. Just a whole wide variety. We would look at the individual client when they came in and talk to their family and determine what it was that they wanted us to try to improve in their life. And then we go from there. If it was, well, I want them to have better table manners, we'd work on the table manners. If it was, I wish she wouldn't bang her nose till it bleeds, and we would work on that. We had one gentleman that his mother just wanted us to be able to teach him how to eat in a restaurant. She wanted to take him to Burger King once a week for a hamburger. And so that was our goal. And that's what we worked on. And eventually he was able to do that. So there wasn't a lot of prescriptive, of what I guess in the old days it really was more person-centered, in as much as there was not a curriculum that you applied to people or a curriculum that you said, here, what would you like for us to teach? But rather the only thing we had was the individual. The only thing we had was the person. And it was like, what do you want their day to be filled with? What is it that we can do to help him be happier and be a better part of your family?
Were there any times when, say, the goals that you felt were important for that person differed from what the family thought would be important goals, or if there was, any conflict as far as the family?
One of the things I thought a lot about when thinking about today and thinking about my experiences at Rauch, there are a few things that really stand out. One is when I realized that the crux of everything, the key to everything, was a working relationship with the family, that they had to trust us and we had to trust them. And I realized this because we had a gentleman whom I loved dearly, but he was pretty rough, pretty big guy, could take the edging off from around a door with his fingers. They were so strong. And he did a variety of things that, we had trouble with, but the one that we were focusing on most was that he would get up and grab other people's food during lunch. And I had talked to his mother about that. No, we don't have that trouble at home. I don't know what it is, Maybe you don't have him sitting in a chair that he likes, or maybe we tried all these different things. And then we had an incident where we had a behavior issue, and my arm was just, and I say this in no disparaging way as far as he was concerned, but I had bruises all up and down my arm where he had just grabbed me and I couldn't get away from him. And I called his mother. I said, you'll have to come and get him. I don't know what to do. I don't know what else to do with him. So this really made Dad mad, okay? So when we had the conference, Mom and Dad came. And that was my first time meeting Dad. Had never met him before. And so we started talking. And so we wanted to know what was going on, whatever. So I looked at him and I said, we're still having trouble with him eating out of other people's plates at lunchtime. I said, how do you all handle that at home? And the dad looked at me and he said, he doesn't eat with us. He says, can you imagine what our life would be like with our other kids if he ate at the table with us? He said, we feed him in the kitchen before everybody else eats. I'll never forget that day because I was so angry and I was so frustrated. And I thought and thought and thought, and I thought, why was she afraid to tell me that? Why didn't she want to tell me that? Okay? one of the biggest fears people at that time, I don't know if they still do or not, was that if they complained to you, then you'd take it out on their kid, and there was no way that they would ever know that you'd done something awful to their child. Or you would kick them out of services, and they wouldn't even get the little services that they're getting now. So those were the fears that they had. And I realized until she knew that my only reason in asking that question was to come up with a solution, and that was it, and trusted me that we weren't going to get anywhere. And so was set about developing trust with the families. And I think to this day, you will find that the families in the ADA, maybe not so much the Access program, but in ADA, that there is that mutual respect and trust. And once that is there, and there are no secrets, and people are not afraid to tell you what's really going on, then you can work on something and do something. So I guess I've never really had a parent who has had different goals for a client than we have. If they have goals, their needs, they know more about their child than I do. Their opinion of what goals that child should have, their adult child, are much more important than mine. And so, you know, there's probably, I don't know that I've ever had that kind of a, problem with a parent. I do try to encourage parents to, to be trusting of each other and to be honest and straightforward with them. And that seems to serve everybody well. Mm-hmm.
Great. Have you worked with parents and siblings in a more organized way through groups of families?
We had a sibling workshop 25 years ago. Adult children, adult siblings, okay? We had it on Saturday. One of our resource teachers, Karen Davis, who did a lot of the artwork, she set that up. It was on maybe 8 to 10 consecutive Saturdays. There were only 2 or 3 families that participated in it. Of the 2 families that participated in it 25 years ago, both of those families now are very involved in the life of their disabled sibling. Okay, in one family, dad is now in a nursing home. Mom is barely able to take care of herself in her own home. The adult son is living in one of our homes in Hawthorne Glen, and the 2 sisters and the brother are much more involved in their brother with the disabilities life than they ever were before. And this is true of another family as well. And I think we did raise some awareness there. I've also recently been faced with the other end of the spectrum, where we have 2 gentlemen with disabilities in one family. They have 2 sisters who live out of town. Their parents are elderly, lots of problems with the parents. The sisters call me from out of town and say, we don't know anything about our brothers. We don't know anything about their medicine. We don't know anything about their services. Our parents are getting older. They don't know what to tell us. One of those ladies left her life in North Carolina, left her business, sold her house, and is now living here and is trying to take care of her mother and dad, and trying to help take care of her 2 brothers with disabilities. And typically, the parents don't want it, they'll say the same thing. I don't want it to be a burden on my other children, okay? And I understand that, but at some point, somebody else besides the mother and dad are going to have to do something. So it's a question of determining who that is and making sure they have the information they want. Or if there isn't anybody else and it's just the 2 sisters, then we're going to have to start talking to the sisters, because you have information that they have to have. And that's a big step for families, to ask their non-disabled sons and daughters to become more involved in their disabled son or daughter's life. Because most of the time they have set it up so that they would take care of that, and it would never be a burden on any of the other members of the family. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, let's talk about the Access program and how you've worked to get clients into the community and to develop relationships with community members.
The Access program came about maybe 15, 20 years ago, and there's a real strong emphasis, and I respect and understand the importance of employment and working. But also, we had a number of clients who were old enough to retire, who wanted to do something else besides work, okay? If they lived at home with mom and dad, all they did was live with mom and dad and come here to the workshop. If they lived in a group home, all they did was live in the group home or even supported living and come here in the workshop. There were not a lot of other avenues for them to get out in the community, to go to a play, to go shopping, to understand their bank account, to do any volunteer work, whatever. So we decided that we wanted to give other choices to people. We didn't want the only choice to be you can work, okay, or you can sit at home. Those are your choices. So we came up with the Access program, and it's optional, it's a choice. We have 60 individuals right now that are in that program. I'd say half of them are there 5 days a week. Those individuals primarily are people who are retired, who have retired from the workshop or the workforce. We have other clients who might come 2 afternoons a week, we have clients that we go to their home and pick them up and take them out in the community to do whatever it is they want to do and then take them back home. They don't even come into the building at all. So there are choices based on what they want to do and what kind of funding they have. All of those services are Medicaid waiver funded. So if they have funding for individual service and that's what they want, we have one gentleman who works from 12 to 6 at Kroger's on Charlestown Road every Friday. And so we pick him up at 9 in the morning, and he does his banking and he goes shopping, and sometimes he wants to go out for lunch or for a movie, and then we take him to work at noon. We have another fella that we have a number of people. Probably the one thing that most of our people do that they truly enjoy is we deliver a lot of Meals on Wheels. We deliver about 55 or 60 Meals on Wheels every week. And that can be an individual client with an individual staff person delivering Meals on Wheels, or it can be one of our staff on a van with 3 clients, and they go and they pick up the 20 meals, and then they go on the route, and the client, this is my door, so I pick up the lunch and go and knock on the door and give it to the elderly person they're delivering Meals on Wheels to. And that is real important. They know what they're doing, and they feel very good about it. They establish relationships with the people that they come to see. For some of the elderly people, they're the only people that they see on a regular basis, other than maybe a family member or two. So there again, it's really based on what it is that they want to do. I think the thing they enjoy most is being with each other and being in a social setting. I know David and I, we joke, you heard his crack yesterday about an institution on a cul-de-sac. Oftentimes, there are individuals who come out of an institution or out of a nursing home, and they live in the community, but they don't do anything, okay? Because of their whatever reason, they stay home all the time. So my point has been, what's the difference? At least in an institution, they had a lot more people to watch and maybe a lot more excitement going on, rather than, on a cul-de-sac in New Albany, Indiana, and never go or do anything or see anything. There are not a lot of people like that, but it happens. I think when it's that balance between independence and isolation, because we have encouraged and had a number of our clients, many of them who are not even here anymore, who've moved out on their own. And yet they still like to keep connections with people back here and with us. And the 2 things that they constantly comment on are the difficulty they have with transportation, because we do not have any public transportation in New Albany. And the second thing is they're alone. They've got their apartment all by themselves. Yeah, they do. And they get very, very lonely. So it's good for some people. It's not good for everybody. I think what I've tried to do and tried to encourage other people to do is not to come up with one answer. You know, don't come up with one thing that you think is the most important thing that everybody has to do, but rather flip it around and see what are all these things that these individuals might be interested in, and then, you know, give more choices to people. Really give them choices. So that's what the Access program does. Typically, they're individuals with more skills maybe than they would have in ADA, mainly because they can, in our ADA group, if we take a group, we don't take a number of ADA clients out in the community in a group. We've just got too many people who have a lot of individual needs. We can't do that. But in the Access group, they go to a dance once a month. This Friday, they're going to the Kentucky State Fair. Just different things that come up, you know. 8 of the guys and 2 staff members went to Hooters for lunch the other day. They had a choice of where they wanted to go, and they wanted to go to Hooters. So I said, well, did the note going home say we're going to Hooters? The lady that was taking them, she said, yes, it did. We said we gave these 3 choices, and they voted to go to Hooters. I said, as long as they know where they're going. So they went to Hooters and had a great time. So.
Have there been any people in the Access program that have gotten to know community members, or the other way around, any community members that have gotten to know some of the Access clients through the program?
I see that most when we go to Harvest Homecoming with the Access clients, and really even ADA clients as well. Very often when you go to like a fair or something, more people know our clients than know us, okay? It could be like one of the guys that comes to Access program is a regular on Friday nights at the VFW, okay? He puts on his blue jeans and his boots, and he dances all night long. And he has a number of people from the local VFW that he knows and that supports him. Some of them are involved with churches, not a lot, but some. And there are some friends I think there that they have made. Can't think of any other specifics. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For some reason, somebody's coming to mind from a long time ago that he was a gentleman that did deliveries of newspapers, of like a community paper that he would drop off.
Yeah, he still does.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit about him?
You mean
without
that,
using his last name?
I don't even know his last name. I know that, you mean the gentleman that would deliver the newspapers from Southeast Christian down at Market Street?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Janet, there were 2 ladies that sort of started our art studio in downtown New Albany, Janet Stepper and Jennifer Dosh. And they knew how to build community. Not everyone does, okay? And Janet is one of these people that if you put her in a room with 25 people and you could say, now when we leave in an hour, I want to know the life story of 5 people, she would be able to get it out of them. And they were just perfect to establish relationships with the community downtown. And whenever this gentleman, I think that delivered newspapers from a church in Louisville, and he would bring them in, and she made a point of introducing him to the clients and the clients to him. I think Bob may have been one of the guys that he always liked to make sure that he said hello to when he came in. I don't know if any of those things ever go outside of the program day. You know, does the guy that deliver newspapers want to go over to Bob's house and take him bowling? I don't know that has happened. I think it could happen, but and I think that's very much David is very, very. I think that's pretty much what his goal is now with Volunteers of America, is to establish more community connections, with people, and that has to be done, as you know, on a one-to-one basis. It has to be done very individually. Mm-hmm.
My memory's not great, but this person I was thinking of actually was a client, and he had sort of a volunteer job that brought him around to various businesses downtown where he would deliver these stacks of papers. That's not ringing any bells.
No, but I know they did lots of things like that downtown, where whenever there was a new store or a new shop that came in, they always did an art piece for them and they took it to them. There's a local newspaper, the Louisville Woman, that's a free newspaper, and they asked to have copies of that dropped off weekly, and just so our clients could go around and deliver them to other places in the community. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Mm-hmm. I hated to lose that place. I fought for many years to keep it open, but the money just wasn't there anymore. It's really sad.
It is, it's a beautiful building.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a good segue into my next question. Can you describe your involvement in some of the many, or give us kind of an overview of the many arts initiatives at ROC, and why has ROC been so active in arts stuff?
Well, I told the story earlier about how George Ducharme and Pat Beeman on the East Coast had gotten this storefront, and they wanted to do that to get their people better connected into the community. So when I made the presentation to our board and they thought it was a wonderful idea, I remember going back to my office and looking up Pat Beeman's telephone number online, and I called her and I said, my God, I don't know what to do. I asked them if we could have a place like you all have, and they said yes, but I don't know what to do there. I don't know what to do in there. We don't have a post office. We don't sell cards. I don't know what to do. And she said, do whatever you do best. Do whatever you're doing now and you do best. Well, we had always done the ceramics and we had always done the weaving. The first person, Karen Davis, who still has her art studio over in Melwood in Louisville, she's into fabric art now, and quilting. But when she worked for us, she was primarily writing, still doing her writing. And she had read an article about a grant for some people in a mental institution in New York, and they did a creative writing workshop. And so she wrote a grant to the Floyd County Council on Arts or something, and advertised in the paper for a creative writing workshop. And I think there were 10 people. There's one person from ROUC, but all the others were people just that saw the advertisement in the newspaper. And she had guest speakers coming in. I think it was on like a Saturday. And then they had a reading. They put all of their work together in a book, which I still have a copy of, called Behind the Scene. And they had their official reading on a Sunday afternoon at IUS. And that sort of began the whole idea of the creative arts. You know, our clients are a really good audience. They take them, they sit, they watch. But had they ever been asked to join? Have they ever been asked to participate? So I came across a group in Louisville. I don't think they're still in existence, but they did creative movement and dance, and they came over and did. I think it was like 5 or 6 weeks. They did a day where they would come over and do some creative movement and dance and stuff with our clients. And it was very interesting to see the clients that were able to do it and those that had no concept of their personal self and space and their bodies and that kind of thing. Then there was a wonderful lady who was head of the arts department for the Floyd County schools. And she was connected with Very Special Arts of Indiana. And they gave a few $1,000s every year for art activities in Floyd County. And she had had a number of our clients when they were in grade school and high school. And she told me later that she always felt bad that she was really never able to come up with some art activities that some of our clients could really benefit from and participate in. So when it got to be May or June and she hadn't spent all her money, she called me up. Her name is Joanne Brooks. And she'd say, Sandy, I've got $600. Can you do something with it? And I sure can. And so that got to be kind of an annual thing. One year we had a African-American drummer from Louisville who spent a whole week at our center. It was summertime. and in his dashiki and all of his accoutrements. And we drummed. We drummed for about drove a whole bunch of people crazy because of the drumming. But a lot of our clients, particularly those that had hearing problems, really loved the drumming. We always invited like the summer schools to come in, like the people that were at summer school at Floyd Central. They would bring their students in. So we did the drumming one year. In our courtyard over on Charlestown Road, you'll see a bench. That was another project we did with a ceramic artist from Louisville. And I don't know how many individual tiles there were, ceramic tiles that were designed by our clients and our staff and our parents and our community workers. And there's like 200 individual tiles that she designed and then fired, and then we painted, and then she put them on this bench that has been out in the yard maybe 10 years now, 10 or 12 years. We did a lot with some local fabric artists who came in and would do different projects with us. And one of the, gamelan, if you know, Greg Acker, who does the gamelan musical instruments. And that was one year that he came over and he did music with us for about a week or two. And all of those were courtesy of very special arts funding. Was supposed to only go to children. They're not supposed to go to people over the age of 21. And yet that's why we would always include younger people in whatever it is that we were doing. So that's how we got started. And when we got the place in downtown New Albany, well, this is what we'll do. We'll do our artwork. And we kept adding to what it was that the collage concept that we came up with. Karen and I finally wrote a description. It's called Behind the Scene. And it is about a paragraph talking about our artwork and why it is the way it is. And I can't quote it, but basically what it's saying is that when you look at a piece of our artwork, you don't know what it is. Is it abstract? Is it a collage? Is it, what is it? And this is what we're asking the community to do for people with disabilities. Look behind that first scene, look behind that first blush, and see what's really involved in that picture. And you'll see all the intricate pieces and all that. And that's what we would like people to do for people with disabilities, is to take time to look past that initial look, to see what that person is really made of. And I always say that's the method to our madness. That's why we do it the way we do, is because we're trying to convey that message to people. Our dear Jennifer passed away this year as well. It was, we really have not recuperated from that. And I'm not sure how our art will go next. I don't know. I don't know. She was, I don't know. We're still trying to figure all that out. Mm-hmm. But we'll have to continue in some way, or she'll come back to haunt us. I know she will.
All right. Well, what would you say were a couple of your, looking back, your biggest career highlights? I'm sure there's more to come, but looking back.
Biggest career highlights. I think I would look at the individual, the artwork. I think that was I'm very proud of that. I think it was real important. I think when I look at individual clients and I see how much better their life is now than it was 30 years ago. We have one gentleman who was living at Muscatatuck, and his parents had come in. When ResCare decided they were going to open their first group home in New Albany, they had targeted like 7 people that lived at Muscatatuck. And this one gentleman was one of the people that they had targeted. And so we had a meeting with the parents in the social worker's office, and I went back to a different part of the building to pick up some papers or something, and when I came back, they were just in tears. The dad was a big old farmer guy, and he was just boo-hooing, and mom was just, crying. I thought, I said, what happened? And they both said, we've been waiting for this day. We didn't want to take him to Muscatatuck. Everybody told us that's where he belonged. Now we're finally going to get to bring him home. Okay. And so I went up that, when I met him and I saw where he lived and what his life was like, and of course you never forget the smell of that place, but I went in and he was in this huge day room, and there were people walking around, people crawling around, people curled up in corners, and he would go from one side of the room where there were all windows and look out the window, then he'd go to the other side of the room where the dining room was to see if it was time to eat. And so when it was time, when they decided, yes, they were going to take him into the home, and he had to come to our program, group homes, they have to go to a day program. And I said, well, we've got to put him in a room where there's a window and there's the food over here, because that's what he's used to doing. And he was a gentleman with a lot of significant behaviors. It took 3 of us to get him off the van and into the building every day. And again, this is 30 years ago. You didn't have a bunch of behavior consultants with all sorts of knowledge, and I think we did okay. I'm not saying, that we needed them, but there were not those kinds of answers that were out there. There was Rosella Stewart from IDC. She would know who I'm talking about, because we called Rosella and said, somebody's got to come and help us here, and she did. She came down and helped us, which I don't know if that still can be done today. I know you can call anybody on the phone and they'll try to give you an answer. I love that when they give us a 1-800 number for crisis management. I keep thinking, you don't know what I'm talking about here. But no, Rosella, she'd hop in the car and come down. We had to clear a whole room. There was nothing in the room but a table and 2 chairs for him. Had a terrible time with him even keeping clothes on. He damaged a lot of stuff, both at the program and at home. He had knocked out all the windows and really having a rough time. And I remember the gentleman that worked for Rest Care at that time, and he had come over for a meeting, and I remember saying to him one day, he said, I don't think we can handle him. We're not getting any answers. We're not doing anything here. And I said, do you know where he was? Did you go up there and see where he was living? And he said, no, he didn't. I said, well, I did. And I said, if we have to send him back there, it's not going to be because he failed. It's going to be because we couldn't figure out what he needed to succeed. Those are 2 different things. What does he need to succeed? And it took a long, long time with a lot of ups and a lot of downs. Today, he lives in one of our houses at Hawthorne Glen. He still comes to ADA 5 days a week. He travels on a van with all the other clients back and forth. He goes out in the community to eat. He has gone to functions. He still has his issues, okay? Who would have thought 30 years ago this guy would ever be able to live the life that he's leading right now? And that to me is a highlight. That to me, because I know that if we hadn't kept trying to figure it out, that he would have been in Muscatatuck until it closed. And no, couldn't have that happen. So I think people who have had their lives improved, those are the things that really feel good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's great. You've spent a lot of years in the field in a variety of capacities. In looking at your tenure, what are some of the most noteworthy changes and struggles across Indiana, sort of looking at us as a state? What should Indiana be most proud of, and where do we need to push harder?
I feel like I started yesterday. That's how quickly the time has gone. I think I've been real fortunate to be involved with some really neat people, you and all the things you've included us in through IIDC. The Governor's Planning Council has got to be one of the most worthwhile groups of people and wonderful people. I was on their board for a number of years, and really grateful for the experience that I had. Was on Very Special Arts Board for a number of years, and really enjoyed that, and it was nice to get a sense of other things that were happening across the country, across the state. Um, I feel like we get less support and less direction, meaningful direction from the state than we ever have. Now it all seems to be that has to do with billing and funding, and really not a lot to do with program or quality of program or anything like that. Just we don't get that anymore. We used to get that before. We don't get that anymore. I think the self-advocates movement that Mary Beth started is crucial, absolutely crucial. I mean, I've seen what it has done on an individual basis as far as somebody like Tim. I also know that when they go to the self-advocates meetings, how meaningful that is. And you're not just teaching the clients when you do that, you're teaching the staff. And that is so important, because we don't have a lot of time to train and teach our staff things. And so what they can get when they take somebody to a conference or to a self-advocates group, that's where I think that's one of the best things that I think that we do in Indiana. I don't know if other states have that or not, but I think what we've done in Indiana is wonderful and very practical, very productive, and all that. There are a couple of things. I don't see a lot of advancement of new things. I think a lot of times we're singing the same old song that we always have, but just a little different tune. Okay? There's nothing really new and outstanding and different. Person-centered planning, that got watered down to a PCD form. It is a form now. IPMG puts it on a form. There's no more process. There's no more getting the people in a room. There's no more establishing a sense of commitment to that individual. You fill out a form just like any other informational form. No one seems to be giving us direction on what we need to do next, or what are some state-of-the-art types of things, or what do we need to do to really go on to the next step. I don't see that. I see that when I look at other states. I see that when I Google and put adults with disabilities new programs or something, and I see what they're doing in New Jersey, or I see what they're doing in Oregon. I don't know that we're doing anything much different in Indiana. There are a couple of periodicals that I get from other agencies in Indiana that really look good. I'm not going to be able to remember the name. One's called Good Day. I think it's a Good Day. It's an Indiana agency. There are a lot of people involved in artwork. There didn't used to be. Okay, there's lots and lots of people involved in arts, which I think is really important. But I don't sense a lot of direction. There's no John O'Brien today. There's no even Al Condalucci, and no one's coming around preaching the word, telling us where we need to go next with people. And I really miss that. And I think it gave us all an idea of what that next step of being a little bit better would be. And I don't feel we do that anymore in Indiana. I don't get it. Maybe it's somewhere else and I don't get it. We're still, at least here in this area, and I can't speak for other areas in Indiana, although I did remember that in a few of the reports to the Governor's Planning Council by the Department of Education, which they usually did on an annual basis, that transition never really got high marks when you read what they submitted to the Governor's Planning Council. I'll speak for locally, okay? It is still a very narrow vision, and no one is looking. I think what bothers me most is we are not looking at the client in a holistic fashion. We're not looking at them as a holistic person. We even title programs School to Work. Would you like that to describe you? Aren't you more than work to, of course. I think we need to look at where are the artists, where are the other things. Now the other states that are focusing on school to community life, where they're broadening that a little bit and seeing if somebody doesn't immediately want to flip a burger or work at Walmart or even work at a sheltered workshop. Maybe they want to continue their education What are we doing to promote post-secondary education for people with developmental disabilities? Louisville, a number of years ago, because one of my coworkers here and I taught classes there, Jefferson Community College had what they called College for Living, and it's still there. If you Google College for Living, you'll see they have them all over the United States. And it is post-secondary education for people with developmental disabilities. And they teach a variety of classes. They teach money management. We taught social relationships. They had people at the institutions in Louisville that wanted to get married, so they sent me and Ron in to, well, it was a whole nother story, but there again, a post-secondary education for people with developmental disabilities. If they're not ready when they graduate from high school to go directly in the workforce, who is, then where else can they go and do something meaningful? One of the things that's happened that I've noticed maybe the past 5 years, and I don't know if it's just us, we've had 6 referrals. Typically they're young men who have been out of school for maybe 2 or 3 years, okay? And when they were in school, they did a lot of, they thought they were going to get a job. Let's say, what was the one project that everybody was focusing on a couple of years ago? The one that was connected to the hospital. It was a big push for this getting the high school students in the hospital. And it was great. They did great. But the students thought they got a job. Those were work placement things, just like the Papa John's is. You go there and you practice folding boxes. Doesn't mean when you graduate somebody's going to pay you to fold those boxes. It's a place where you go and train to fold boxes. So anyway, when these 5 or 6 individuals didn't have a job when they came out, really had an awful opinion of workshops, terrible opinion of workshops. Like, we had people posted to the walls and just beating them, whatever, and I'd say, well, okay. So they sit at home for 2 or 3 years. Parents usually get upset. They're on the computer all night long, or they're watching television or something. All of them have been, I guess, what you call mainstream. They've not in specialized classes. They were in with, their peers. So they come to Access. They're there for maybe a week. One guy who was just charming, lovely guy, he looked at Kevin and me and he said, I don't want to offend you. He said, but I'm not like these people. Okay? These are the people that are in the classroom down the hall. I'm not like them. They don't want to be with other people who are disabled. They don't see themselves with other people that are disabled. Worse than that, it's not that they don't see themselves with other people, they don't want to be around them, okay? It would be a negative for them to be any place where there are other people with disabilities. So they're very nice, and I always say, absolutely, I don't blame you, I understand, no hard feelings, wish you the best if there's ever anything we can do. But it's the folks the students that seem to have more skills and don't get an immediate job, or even if they do get an immediate job, who's got a full-time job anymore? Nobody. So what do? They work 20 hours a week. What do you do all the other time? Do you know what church you belong to? Have you got a bank account established? Do you have friends that'll take you to the bowling alley? Who does all that, okay? So I don't know if it's just unusual here, or is that happening? Is that happening now, where the side effect of having somebody not with the disabled students but with the others, and even to the point where they're kind of looking down at those that are disabled, then where do they go? What do they do? Now, a couple of them, it's been interesting twice. One of the guys did continue to go to Access, and we had a Christmas party last year. And Dad came over here to pick him up, and the Christmas party was here at the workshop. And Dad walks in and he sees 2 kids from the same high school as his son. And he says, what are they doing here? I said, well, I don't know. I said, they've been here maybe a year now. I don't know. You mean they work here? I said, yeah. He said, do you pay them? I said, well, if they work, we pay them, And he said, well, what can they do? I said, go talk to him. I don't know. Shocked to think. I don't know what he expected to see when he walked in, but he was shocked to think that that this workshop was actually a place where somebody wanted to be, where they were doing something meaningful and got a job. Well, so now since then, his son spends most of his time here at the workshop, still comes to Access somewhat, but comes over here to the workshop. There's, it just seems like we're not looking at the whole person. We're not looking at the whole individual with a disability to really understand the need for and their importance to be connected with some sort of spiritual community, to be, to be connected in their own community. That, it used to be pretty standard when I first started working at Rauch, and people would describe the different programs. They'd always say, well, we've got X number of people working at the workshop, and they earn a paycheck, and they pay taxes just like you do. That was always kind of a standard thing. And I don't know, is that what you have to do to be as good as me, or to be a person? I hope that's not all. I hope that isn't all it takes for you to be a whole person, that you have a job and pay taxes. I understand all the importance for the work and the connection and the natural support. I get it. Trust me, I get it. All I'm saying is that it's still only looking at one part of that individual. And I don't think that's holistic. I don't think that's being respectful of that person as an individual. And I think in the long run, we're doing a disservice. And I don't see that getting any better. I really don't see that getting any better. I don't know. I would love to see college for living in our area. I would love to see that. I would love to have a place like Ivy Tech or some other community college allow us to have 2 or 3 classes, for people with developmental disabilities. And, and somebody say, well, they can go to class with everybody else. Well, yeah, no one's saying they can't, okay? But is there a subject that these people who happen to have a disability, maybe they won't have a disability, is there a subject that we can offer that they would like to come and learn about and see what happens there? It's like Karen, her creative writing class. She didn't say it had to be somebody with a disability. It so happened that most of the people were. One of them was not. You don't have to, but that's what I would like to see. I would like to see other options for people after high school that are not just work options, and that really look at the individual in a holistic way and really try to meet the needs of that individual as a total person. I don't think we're doing that.
That's a very, very important point. All right. Just a final question. What do you think training should look like for people who are just getting into this field, to train people for the future?
We have an orientation that we do, and it's good, I guess, but I have some very training for people who work with people with disabilities. Right now in the ADA, I've got like 7 or 8 staff people who are probably the most skilled people that I know. And one of the reasons they're most skilled is because we've been together and we've been working together for maybe 10, 15 years. We always had a lot of time to talk and learn, all right? We don't have that anymore. Every single minute of the day is required to be billed. That staff person has to be billing, has to be providing services to a client. So there's not a lot of time for people to be trained or taught. I think they've looked at online things, would that help? And that it probably would. Selecting proper people to work with people with disabilities, I think, is number one. You got to make a good choice, and then very early on, you've got to watch and see what's working and what's not, whether it's a good fit or not a good fit, and try to catch all that real early. And it takes, of course, I believe teaching's an art. I don't think it's a science. I think you're born with the ability to communicate and teach people. Maybe you get better at it based on your education. But if you don't have that way of being able to communicate with people, if you're not willing to listen to somebody who can't talk and try to figure out what happens next, then you're not gonna enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, then it's probably not gonna last for you. So I think the training for people to work with people with disabilities should include all sorts of things, including the diagnosis and all that academic stuff. But then mainly interpersonal skills, how to get along with someone, how to respect somebody, how to handle yourself. Probably more so in the residential than even in the day program. It's pretty easy to do in the day program because we're all kind of together. Residential must be a lot more difficult. But that's the key. It's easier now because many of the people have gone to school with our clients, and that makes it really easy. I've hired people. One lady I hired about 10 years ago, I came in and I was taking her around and introducing to people. Oh yeah, I took the gym with him. Oh yeah, we were in class together. Okay, so they're coming into it from a completely different way than somebody else might be. So that's a good question. I don't think there's a real easy answer to that at all. The only other thing that I had written down, I know when supported employment first started, that the guy that was starting supported employment here went to talk to my dad. He was telling me about supported employment and this is what they're going to do. And I said, you need to talk to my dad. He said, why? I said, well, he did that. That's what he did. What do you mean? I said, well, go talk to him. My dad got people in jobs all over town. He had people who worked 25 years at the hospital and retired, and people who worked in, so I said, it's not new. It might sound new, but it's really not new. And basically it was done the same way. It's your connections. It's who you know. It's making that good match. But this is something that I found, and I'll give it to you, when I was cleaning out my father's file cabinet. And so it's really, really old. And it's called The Importance of Being Relevant. And it's written by Spiro Mitsos. Do you know who that is? Dr. Mitsos, PhD. He was one of the founders of ResCare. He started ResCare. He was alive 5 years ago. I don't know if he still is or not. Very involved in ResCare starting up here. He did all the behavior management training. He always referred to it as the gentle art of self-defense. He talked about dealing with people. But anyway, this little flyer was in my dad's file box. It says, once upon a time in a land called Anywhere, a group of good people assembled to discuss their concerns about the manifest unmet needs of disadvantaged people in their community. Their concern led to the development of a voluntary health organization as an agent to facilitate meeting these needs of people. That organization became the conscience of the community, mobilizing people, money, legislation, and greater awareness of the plight of the disadvantaged. One day, an important decision was made. A rehabilitation facility would be developed in order to maximize the delivery of needed services to these needful people. A building was acquired, staff were employed, all hail a job well done. But the story doesn't end there. Years went by. The facility grew. Its staff became more professionalized. New implicit goals emerged. The facility must be adequately funded. Staff must be adequately paid. The facility image must be enhanced throughout the land. More clients were needed to justify larger budgets and community appeal. Somewhere along the line, the needs of the facility became more important than the needs of the disadvantaged. There was a time when the question was, what does Johnny need, and how can we see to it that he gets it? And now the questions are, does Johnny fit our admissions policy? What financial resources are there for fee payment? Have all the pre-admission forms be completed? Is Johnny motivated for our kind of program? And the last paragraph is, soon a new organization began to emerge in the community. These were groups of citizens concerned with the manifest unmet needs of disadvantaged people. Okay, you end up right. And I really hold this true to my heart because I don't think there's anything wrong with coming full circle. But I think it does require you to take a look and say, okay, this is what we thought was important and this is what we did. Did it take us farther, or are we right back where we started from? And in some areas, I think, of what I've experienced in 30-odd years, we're pretty much right back where we started from. So,
Produced by Center on Aging and Community, Indiana Institute on Disability and Community, Indiana University. Funded in part by a grant from the Indiana Governor's Council for People with Disabilities. Copyright 2017, the Trustees of Indiana University.